Shabbat Shalom, brothers and sisters. We are going to begin a new cycle of Torah portions, which happens to be the book of Exodus, but in Hebrew is called Shemot. But is one of the important things about learning Torah is that we get to learn a lot of amazing things. Is one of the things that the Creator wants us to learn, and that's what it's all about, to learn what the Creator wants. Every single Shabbat, we take the task to bring you these Torah portions through the entire year, and that's what we're going to find out. In this Torah portion, we're going to find out basically the continuation from last week's. We jump a couple hundred years after, and we'll find out so many important things to understand the book of Exodus. So that's what we're going to find out. Welcome to this Shabbat. I'm Moreh Rapha'Yah, and let's just jump into it. So the book of Shemot, which is names, Shem, of course, there is a word for name, but Shemot is in plural. Let's jump into it. Parashat, or Torah portion number 13, verse 1 all the way to 6, verse 1. These are the Shemot, or names of the sons of Israel who went to Mizraim, or Egypt, together with Yaakov, their father, each man with his family. Here we pretty much summarize the whole entire end of the book of Genesis, where it speaks about how our father Israel, Yaakov, went into this empire where Yahweh was basically ruling. And you have to understand something. Yaakov needed to ask permission from the Creator Yahweh in order for him to go in, where he's being asked for, which is going to the land of Egypt. If you guys remember, he went to Bethel, and there our Creator told him that it was okay to go to that land because there was a plan. This is something that we have to learn something from these lines that we read every time, that every time we have plans, we always have to ask the Creator if it's His will for us to do this or to do that. We always have to include the Creator in our plans. It doesn't matter what they are, we have to include Him. It's very important for us in this journey as a Hebrew, in this journey to understand what the Torah is all about. Let's continue. Chapter 15, verse 13, Yahweh said to Abraham, "Know this, by the way, your Seta, or generation, will be strangers in a land that is not theirs. They will take you into slavery, and you will be treated wickedly and humiliated there for 400 years. Now, the reason why I bring in all these verses, a couple of verses, which I will bring more, is for us to understand the length of years, how many years our fathers were in the land of Egypt. We probably in the past we thought that it was 400 years in Egypt, but when we actually learn the chronology of our fathers from the moment that Yahweh gave this command, this chapter 15 verse 13 that we read, let's go back. Know this, that your Sarah, not yourself, but your generation, be in a strange land. Now it says 400 years, but we have to understand what he meant by that. And we have to look other verses to comprehend the whole concept of what Yahweh is telling our father Abraham. So let's continue. Chapter 15, verse 16, the next very verse. Only in the fourth generation your Sarah or generation will return here. For the evil, the Emori, is not yet complete. Now the Amorites were basically the giants. If you do research, you will be, that's part of the race of giants that were on that land of Canaan. But in the very beginning, there wasn't so many. By the time of Moses, by the time of Yahushua, we understand that that land was infested with giants, with Nephilims. So that's what the Creator said, the evilness of the memory of the giants or the Nephilims were not yet complete because it was way too early. By that time, when the Creator asked Moses and Joshua to go inside, it was completely infested with so many giants to the point where the Torah speaks and it says very clear that our Creator cast and also killed so many giants or Nephilims. If you guys do research, you might want to write it down. If you take notes, it's very important. Look for this island of Sardine Islands in the Mediterranean. You'll find out that it's a holocaust of Nephilims. So many bones that even the locals know it. And they know that they give a certain word that states that these giants came from a land which happens to be Canaan. Now, what happens? Where are the bones? Well, every local know that in the island of Sardine, the Vatican came and they retrieved all the bones because they don't want people to know about our history, our past. But it is for us to search it out because it's our call. Now, I want to also, before I forget, say something that every generation, you might want to write it down, is 100 years. A lot of Christians and even Messianics, they speaks about that every generation is 70 to 80 years, which is not truth. Here in this verse 15 and also 16, in the first verse it says Shana, which is a year, and here in this word generation is not year, it says door, but not door of your house. Door, which means D-O-R, which means a generation, a cycle. And then if you put them together, 400 years, and it says in the fourth generation, automatically tells you that every generation is 100 years. The book of Deuteronomy, or Devarim 3:8, at the time we captured the territory of two kings of the Amorites, the east of the Jordan between the Arnon Valley and Mountain Hermon. Here we can pretty much see that this is where just as Moshe and Yahushua went in there and cast all these Nephilims or giants out, we pretty much see how they were going by place to place, and they were fear the nations around because Israel, because they knew that the Creator was with our fathers in the wilderness. Now let's go back. Exodus 12:40, the time that the sons of Israel lived in Mizraim or Egypt and in the land of Canaan was 430 years. If you notice, here are two major factors. The first one is that here it says that the time that our fathers lived, it says two places, in Egypt and also in the land of Canaan. And it says it's summarized for 430 years. Now, I want to pause here for a moment, guys, because I want to bring other sources so we can comprehend this whole subject about the 430 years or the 400 years, either or. But at the end of the day, we're going to summarize it and we're going to split in the chronology for where did all this started. And let's find out. I want you to see this. This is Targum Yonatan of the Aramaic version of the Torah 1240. In the days of sojourn of the sons of Israel in Mizraim or Egypt were 30 weeks of year, 30 times 7, which comes to 210 years. But the number of the 430 having passed, Yahweh spoke to Abraham in an hour that he spoke to him in the 15th of Abib, between the divided parts, unto the day they left Mizraim. Do you understand this verse, brothers and sisters? So that means, let's start off with it says here 30 times 7. If you do that math, it's 210 years. How many years were our fathers in Egypt? I will bring it to you a few slides more, the whole concept in a graphic. But here it says 210 years. our fathers were in Egypt. It wasn't 400 years or 430. It was only 210. But when did the Creator make the covenant with our father? It happened to be in the same night where we eat the Pesach, the Passover. It says here that he did that on that evening of the 15th of Abib. Amazing, because I will show you next what it is. So let's go back real quick, and I want to bring you next what I'm trying to tell you. Exodus 12 verse 41. Look at what it says here. A different verse. The first one was 40, this is 41. After 430 years, on that day, do you see that? It says very clear, on that day, all the divisions of Yahweh left the land of Egypt. Do you see that? All the 12 tribes left that place on that very date. Now, let me ask you a question, since you guys are teachers and also learners of the Torah. When did they leave? What day was it when our fathers left Egypt? It happens to be on the 15th of Abib. If you read earlier, when did our Creator make the covenant with our father Abraham? In the same night. So that means it tells you, brothers and sisters, and me, that our Creator is very precise when it comes to prophecies. It is very precise when it comes to fulfilling every prophecy, including our Mashiach. That tells you that from the moment that our Creator made that covenant on that 15th of Abib, exactly many years later, our Creator's getting our fathers out on that fulfillment of that 430 years. But the question remains, when does the 430 years or 400 years started? Before that, let me show you this. Targum Yonatan 12:41 on that verse. And it was at the end of 30 years for the fact of this that Yitzhak was born. You see that? And from there until they left Mizraim or Egypt 430 years. 400 years. The same day was when all the forces of Yahweh were released from the land of Egypt. You see that? So in other words, what is basically telling you this in this Targum Yonatan is it was 30 years after that Yitzhak was born, the 400 years started. You see that? The four generations. Now, let me show you this on this graphic. But before that, book of Acts 7 verse 6. Look what it says here. What Yahweh said to him was, your descendants will be strangers in a foreign land, where they will be enslaved and oppressed. How many? 400 years. But, once again, it wasn't 400 years. Okay? It was a time split there, that they were in the land of, what do you call this? In Canaan, one half, and the other half was in the land of Egypt. Now, let's look at the graphic. From the moment, and this is where the 30 years started. When Abraham, our father Abraham, was 70 years, that's what he was called. That's why our father was summoned to follow our Creator. 5 years later, okay, is when our father Abraham went out of Haran. 25 years later is when Yitzhak was born. So 25 plus 5, it gives you the sum of 30 years. Those 30 years is when he was 100 years. And that happens when our father Abraham was 100 and Yitzhak was born. 60 years later, Yaakov was born. I want you to do the math after this, please. So 60 plus 25 or 30, 25 plus 5, 30, it gives you the sum of what? We'll find out in a minute. plus when Yaakov entered into Egypt, he was 130. So 130 plus 60 plus 25 plus 5, it gives you 220 years. After 280 years, Joseph died. 430 years after is exactly when Moshe went out of Misraim or Egypt, and he had the Pesach. That was the Exodus. That was when they exit the land of Egypt. And it happens to be 210 years from the moment that our father Yaakov enters into Egypt. 210 years. Now, the sum, the whole thing, 220 plus 210, it gives you from the call of our father Abraham, the 70 years, all the way to 430 years when they came out. Now, let's go with the generations. The first generation is when Jigsaw was born. The second generation is when Yaakov enters Egypt. Joseph is the third generation. That's when he died. And the fourth generation is when Moshe or Moses exits with our fathers out of Egypt. Now, from the moment that Jigsaw was born to the moment that they got out of Egypt is the total sum of 400 years. You see the content there, brothers and sisters? So here is a clear indication of, first one is 400 years from the moment that Jigsaw was born all the way to when they went out of Egypt, and from the moment that our father Abraham was called to the moment that they went out is 430 years. There's a difference of 30 years. Now let's continue. Exodus 1 verse 9. And he said to his people, look, the sons of Israel have become too numerous and powerful a people for us. Now, it is very important to us to understand this concept of the Egyptians. You have to understand that little by little, every single sons of Israel, our fathers, talking about Joseph was the first one to die. Well, actually, after Yaakov, Israel died, then Joseph was the next one. And little by little, each brother started dying. Egyptians didn't say anything because they were too powerful. And when I mean too powerful, meaning literally speaking, okay, they were warriors. By the way, they fought for Egypt. In book of Yashar, it speaks very clear that the sons of Israel were very powerful in warriors. Even Moshe next. But the point here is that they were very powerful and they were revered by the Egyptians themselves. They fought so many battles for Egypt, and that's why when each one of them started dying little by little, then after a new generation came in. And that's what the Torah says very clear, that a new Pharaoh came in. I think it happens to be one of the sons of the previous Pharaoh that took over. And the Torah says that he didn't know Joseph. What the Torah means by that statement is that he did not acknowledge the deeds of Joseph and his brothers. Okay, so and his father Yaakov, of course, because they were very blessed, and because of that blessing that they possessed, our fathers in Egypt, and of course the rest of them were going to benefit from it. That's why Egypt had a very prosperous and shalom and peaceful 220 years of peace. That was one of the reasons. But right after that, the Egyptians became very rebellious. And that's what they say and what they're saying. Let's continue. But I want you to see something that you are very familiar with, and at the same time you didn't know this. Exodus 1:10. Come, let's use cunning to deal with them. Otherwise they will continue to multiply, and in the event of war, they can ally themselves with our enemies, fight against us, and leave the earth completely. In other words, leave our land completely. But you have to understand this. Our fathers were they owned lands. By the way, the Pharaoh gave it to them. The land of Goshen was basically almost like the land of United States. It was very, very blessed land. And not only that, they possessed that land, and they had they were pretty wealthy. They had so many, they have anything that you can ask for on that land. But little by little, they start using their brain for evil, the pharaohs, the new Pharaoh, and also the Egyptians. And I want you to see something. Book of Yashar 67, 21, 22. And the king said to Bilam, what should we do to Israel? Surely after a certain way, at first we opposed them and could not prevail over them. You see that? Now therefore I will also give you counsel against them, by which we may prevail over them. Now who's speaking here is Bilam. Do you guys remember Bilam, the one who cursed our fathers in the desert? He happens to be the same one. But you have to understand this. He was in that generation. He was like 100 plus when he was cursing our fathers in the desert. But if we track back early ages, he was very young when he started off his business with witchcraft and a wizard. He was very powerful, but he could not do anything against our fathers because Yahweh would not allow him. He was always blocking his witchcraft, his spells and so forth. Yahweh was always doing it through to our fathers, protecting them. Let's continue. 23, and Bilam answered to the king, saying, send now and call your 2 counselors. We will see what their counsel is on this matter, and then your servant will speak. The reason why he wanted to do that is because he didn't want to be very obvious. We know that he means to harm our fathers, but he wants to have another opinion so that way he can if it's favorable on his side, so he can have more weight on more credit in what he's claiming about. But guess who were the other counselors? And it's people that you and I know for a long time, that we have searched the scriptures. Let's continue. Verse 24, and the king sent and called his 2 counselors, Ruel, which happens to be Yitro, the Midianite, and Job, the Uzite. Remember the book of Job? It happens to be the same very one. And they came and sat before the king. Verse 40. Now the first one is Yitro. And look at what it says. Now then, if it seems good in your eyes, stop destroying the sons of Israel. But if it's not your will that they should live in Egypt, send them from here, so that they may go to the land of Canaan, the land where their ancestors stayed. And when the Pharaoh heard the words of Yitro, he was very angry with them, so that he arose in shame at the presence of the king, and he went to Midian, his land, and took the stick of Joseph with him. Now, in these very 2 verses we just read, brothers and sisters, we just happened to read a very powerful statement from Yitro. He wasn't in the middle. He was basically in favor of our fathers. He basically said, you know what, don't do anything with them. First, whenever you have a chance, read that verse, you'll hear all his statement, all his background, what he's claiming about in the favor of our fathers, how they went through so many things and they're still alive, how many things that our father Abraham went to, and Jacob went to, and Joseph did, and so forth, and still our father Yahweh always blessing them. So in other words, what he's basically stating about our father is just let them go, don't do anything, because nothing's going to happen. They're going to be even more blessed. You cannot do harm to them. okay, for a longer time. No, they will be blessed no matter what. Just let them go to their land of their ancestors, Canaan. The Pharaoh was not happy. Yitro left, okay, he didn't want to be around. He left his to Midian, and the very last verse, very last statement that he states, he took the rod of Yahoseph. In a moment, I will speak a little bit of that, but the next Torah portion, I will literally speak about the whole thing about the staff of Moshe, which happens to be the staff of Yahoseph as well. Verse 42, and the king said to Job, happens to be the next one, what do you say, Job? What is your counsel concerning the Hebrews? Then Job said to the king, behold, all the inhabitants of the earth are in your power. Let the king do what seems good in his eyes. If you notice here, brothers and sisters, we read that Job was not in favor nor opposite. He was neutral. Sometimes it is good, but it isn't. In the side of Yitro, he was in favor of our fathers. If you guys notice in these two persons, we happens to know that Yitro was very blessed because he kind of was converted afterwards at the very end when he met Moshe and so forth, but we'll get into that in a moment. But in the side of Job, what happens to him? He was tested in his emunah, in his consistency to the Creator. Remember what happens in the book of Job, all his trials and tribulations that he went through to test him if it was yes or no. Sometimes we cannot be in the middle. Sometimes we need, remember what the Mashiach says, that our saying should be yes or no, not in the middle. That's what we see here. Job didn't say no or yes, but he was stayed in the middle. It's something that our Creator is not really favorable about. Let's continue. Let's go into the book of Yashar 61 verse 1 and look at the background of Bilan. And among the servants of the Angia was a young man of 15-year-old. Bilan, the son of Beor, was his name, and the young man was very wise and understood the arts of the witchcraft. And Angia said to Bilam, conspire for us, I beseech you, with sorcery, that we may know who will prevail in the battle to which we are now proceeding. And they are appearing to him in the waters, the similar images of the host of Angias falling before the similar images of the Egyptians and the sons of Jacob. What he saw here is basically their army where Bilam was with them being defeated. And the reason why we see over and over again is that every time our fathers are in favor of something, of a cause, and there's always, you have to understand something, brothers and sisters. I just want to make a little parenthesis here. Just because we live in 2024, it doesn't mean that there are not witchcraft. There are a spiritual world out there. Don't believe that this is just a material world. There are witchcraft. There are wizards. There are witches. We just don't. They don't wear long hats and long noses or anything or green. No, they are in power now. Some are women, very beautiful women. Okay, the beautiful dresses. Men are wearing beautiful suits, and sometimes they are governors, sometimes they are presidents, and this is just a fact. I'm not making it up. Even the so-called people in show business, there are too. In a lot of things that you see on the stages and shows that you see nowadays, this is what they portrayed. And this is just something that they put it out there right in front. They're not hiding anymore. Okay, it's a cult. It's something that they have to do in order to convey their masses. But if you know Torah, you will see it from afar away. But people who don't know these things, they don't have the eye to capture these things. We know that Balaam was meant to hurt our fathers, but they were defeated because Yahweh was with them. And remember this, they were fighting here in the favor of the Egyptians, our fathers. Because remember that they went and lived with Joseph. They were fighting for Egypt. Okay, so Egypt was very blessed around that time. Well, I'm talking about the period of 210 years. Verse 27 and 28 and 29. And Sephah said to Balaam, try by divination for us so that we may know who will prevail in the battle, us or the Egyptians. And Balaam go up and tried the art of divination and was skilled in knowing it, but he was confused that the work was destroying his hand. And he tried again, but he did not succeed. And Balaam despaired of him and left him and did not complete him. For this was from Yahweh in order to cause Sephah and his people to fall in the hands of the sons of Israel. You see that? Who had trusted in Yahweh, a yield of our fathers in the word. If you notice here once again, it is something that our Creator, if we are keeping Torah, if we are part of the northern kingdom and we believe in the Mashiach, it is very certain that our Father is going to protect us. It is certain that our Father will make a shield among us from any witchcraft, any divination, any cast. Every time you hear the word hex, they're going to put a hex on someone, is because they're going to put a curse on someone. That's what it means. We need to be careful. We need to put boundaries in ourselves with people, because you just never know. Believe me, there is a lot of witches nowadays. We just don't see them. They don't even look like one. 70 verse 5. Balaam, the son of Beor, the magician, answered to the king and princes and said, remember now, O my master and king, the dream which you have dreamed many days since, and what your servant has interpreted for you. Now, the reason why I bring this verse is because I'm fast forwarding, because it's a lot to cover, but I'm just going to summarize it right now. He's speaking here in this very verse about that that Pharaoh on that era of Moshe, he had a dream, and the one who interpreted the dream was Balaam. He interpreted that he knew that there was a Redeemer, a Mashiach, coming to deliver our fathers from the slavery. Now, they just didn't know who he was. And he was among them. That's why they increased their labor. That's why they increased to find out who was it. And to the end, to make things even worse, they cast the male babies into River Nile. All this happened while Balaam was around. Okay? Now, he's reminding the Pharaoh to do something about it. And that's what we find out later with the kids, with the babies. Let's continue. I want you to see this very verse. 22 verse 5. And he sent Numbers, and he sent messengers to Balaam, the son of Beor, to Petor, the river Euphrates, in his homeland, to say to him, listen, people has come out of Mizraim or Egypt, spread throughout the land and settle with me. Here we kind of fast forward and we're going back again, but I want you to notice how a lot of nations around, a lot of tribes around Canaan, they were interested on divination and witchcraft. And in order for them to win battles, they had to use the means of the spiritual world. And for that, they needed someone special. Balaam happens to be one of them. And it's just an example for you to understand that he was somebody for hire. For example, if you like today, people who are very good on witchcraft and witches, if you pay them money, they'll put a curse on someone. Especially if they're using black magic. They're literally going to put a curse on someone, and that person is going to be hurt. So that's what Balaam was all about. It's all about money, but you pay me this and I'll do this for you. And he was very powerful, but he couldn't do anything about our fathers. because once again, Yahweh was with them. And he is with us as well. Book of Yashar 70 verse 15. His sons, look what it says to the Pharaoh. His sons sold their brother Yosef, who went to Egypt and became a slave and was placed in the prison house for 12 years. He's speaking something true, but he's twisting the truth. You see that? That's what the devil does. That's what he did in chapter 3 of Genesis, Bereshit, of Chava, that he twisted the truth with lies. Verse 16, until the nation lighthouse dreamed dreams and removed him from the prison house and magnified him above all the princes of Egypt because of his interpretation of his dreams. 17, and when Yahweh caused a famine in all the land, he sent and brought his father and all his brethren and all his father's house and supported them without price or reward. You see how he's twisting the truth? And he bought the Egyptians as slaves. Now, once again, he's speaking the truth, but at the same time, he's twisting the words. He said, without a price or reward. No, they had to pay their price, and that was defend our land. So there are a lot of things that he's twisting. He's twisting the truth, of course, with a lot of things that he's adding there, but a lot of things that he's saying, they were true. Yosef, when he was in power, he bought the Egyptians. And you know how the wheel turns around in our life? The same thing. We could be down, but in a moment's notice, we could be up. And he's always moving around. Depends how Yahweh moves the wheel. You see that? Remember that Yosef was a slave, and then he became very powerful. Now he's speaking to them, to the Pharaoh, and he says, he bought the Egyptians. Now let's make them slaves again. See that? Once again, and that's exactly what they did. 47 verse 19. Why should we die before your eyes? Buy us in our land for food. As for the people, he reduced them into slavery city by city. This is what Yosef is doing. You have saved our lives, so if it pleases master, we will be Pharaoh's slave. Remember that Yosef had the ring. He could do a lot of laws, okay? He can institute a lot of statutes in the city of where he was stated, city by city, but in the land of Mizraim, Egypt, he could do a lot of things. He became very powerful, Yosef, because of the wisdom Yahweh gave him. But at the same time, that was the design, that was it. If just like today, and it's been for many centuries, and even the Torah speaks that if you don't have any money, you have to serve yourself. And it's been over centuries in every country that you see around without slavery. That's what it has become. So you have to understand this, that Yosef is doing something very wisely. They didn't have any money, they didn't have any grain, they didn't have any lands. So at the end, they sell themselves for food. And this is, once again, what it was, it will be again. Remember what the mark of the beast is? It could be the same thing too. They could be utilized for evil. What he meant for good, Satan can utilize it for evil. Okay? Chapter 2, verse 11 of Exodus. One day when Moshe, already a grown man, he went out to visit his brothers, the sons of Israel, and he saw them struggling with heavy labors. Now, the reason why I bring this verse, and I'm kind of fast forwarding a little bit more, is because I want you to understand that Moses, contrary to popular belief, and even in movies, he knew his background, he knew his roots, he knew he was a Hebrew. He not all of a sudden he was 30 years old or whatever, and he finds, oh, I'm Hebrew, really? No, he knew the entire time that he was a Hebrew. The only difference is that he wasn't with his brothers. He was basically was going to become the second or the Pharaoh, the next Pharaoh. But he never forgot his roots. He's very clearly says that he went with his brothers in Goshen. And look, I want you to see this. Yashar 70 verse 35. And Moshe asked him, saying, why did this work done to you day by day? And they told them all that have fallen upon them, and all the commands that Pharaoh has given them before his birth. And they told them all the counsels that Balaam, the son of Beor, had counseled against them, and what he also counseled against him to kill him when he had taken the king's crown from his head. You see that? I want you to know a background of Moses, because we read it on the Torah and sometimes we don't understand what we read, but there's always a backstory of what we read. The story is basically that, as I told you earlier, there was a prophecy that was a redeemer, a Mashiach, a deliverer to deliver our fathers from slavery. It was Moshe. Remember that he was drawn from the waters, right? And he was basically raised with all the, all the people who were on the Pharaoh's princes. But the point here is that one day when he was very little, they were on the council, and baby Moshe went and took Pharaoh's crown and put it in his head. All the people, including the Pharaoh, even Balaam was there, were in shock. And Balaam said to the Pharaoh, he is the kid, he is the promised Mashiach, the deliverer, that he's going to come and take your place. Pharaoh didn't say anything. He paused for a moment. He said to Balaam, let's test this if what you're saying is right and is true. Let's bring an onyx stone and also a hot coal. Bring it and put it in front of him. And if he take the shiny onyx, we know that he's know what he's doing. But if he doesn't know, he's gonna take the hot coal. And exactly right, baby Moshe was about to take the onyx because he knew what he was doing, but angel Gabriel took his hand and moved it towards the hot coal, and he grabbed it and he put it in his mouth. That's why Moshe became slow in speech. Remember what the chapter 3 of Shemot or Exodus speaks when Yahweh spoke to him in the burning bush. Remember Moshe said, I'm very slow in speech. Is because that was the story of Moshe. So this is what you read earlier. He's reminding the Pharaoh about what he needs to do next. Verse 38, when Moshe heard these things, his anger was kindled against Balaam, and he tried to kill him. He was an ambush to him day by day. And Balaam feared Moshe, and he and his 2 sons arose and came out of Egypt, and fled and gave up their souls and turned out to the land of Cush, Kikanos, king of Cush. Now we know that Moshe and Balaam passed, face to face. They had their history. They were not just one day they got to meet each other like later. No, they have there's a backstory between those two. We know that Moshe wanted to kill him. That's why Balaam fled Egypt. There's more to it, but once again, because of time strings, that's what we're just gonna fast forward. Let's continue. These are the names of Moshe. Remember that Moshe is because the Pharaoh's daughter called him Moshe, drawn out of water. But each one of them, his father, his mom, his brothers, sisters, call him names according to what they saw in him. The first one, book of Yashar 67, speaks about all that. The first one is Moshe, Chabar, Yekutuil, Yeret, Abil Sanuch, Abit Dor, Abit Sochot, and Shemai. All these are the names of Moshe when he was born. Now let's look into the chronology that I'm bringing right now. Next is that, and I always I always ask myself, why is it that it doesn't make any sense what I'm reading? Why is it that I'm trying to, comprehend the Torah of the 40 years that Moshe apparently went out of Egypt, and then all of a sudden he just had 2 kids that were really young when he came back to Egypt. Remember that he left to Midian, and after that he went to meet his father-in-law Jethro, right? And then he marries Sephora, and then he got 2 kids in the period of 40 years, brothers and sisters. It has to have something happen between it. And here, this is the chronology that the book of Yasher speaks about Moshe. And I think I want you to have, I will ask you to have an open mind to understand a lot of things that are hidden for so many centuries. I want you to know that the book of Yasher, it's a very interesting book, that even there are 2 sources in the scriptures, in the book of Yahushua, and also I think it first of Samuel talks about reference to the book of Yasher. So that gives a favorable credit to the book of Yasher. These are the timeline of Moshe after the exile of Egypt. Moshe escapes Egypt after 26 years old. When he was 26 years old, Moshe comes and becomes king of Cush, and for 40 years. After 40 years, he arrives in Midian at the age of 66. Moshe imprisoned for 10 years by Yitro. Moshe is free and marries Sephora at the age of 76. Now let's go with the first one real quick. Moshe escapes Mizraim. Let me pause here for a moment. When he was 26, remember the Torah says that he saw another Hebrew fighting with an Egyptian. And if you read the book of Yasher, it speaks very clear that this Egyptian raped his wife, the Israelite's wife. And not only that, before that, he tied him up, and he put him there to watch over that he was raping his wife. And after that, he started beating the crap out of them. And that's one of the reasons when he heard about this story, he killed him out of anger, because of course it wasn't right. It wasn't right. You cannot just stay there and look at it. Something has to happen, and he ended up killing him. After that, Pharaoh found out he wanted to kill him, and something between happened, which another time we will talk about it because of time once again. But he flees Cush, which is Assyria. He goes to Assyria, and he's there for 40 years. And between those 40 years, before he became a king, he was a warrior. He was an ally. He went there to fight for the Cush, for the Assyrians, and they made him a king. The queen wanted to marry him, but he did not want to take the queen of Cush. Why? Because he knew that the Torah speaks that you should not take any Canaanite, any person who Canaan. Why? Because they worship idols, and that she refused for so many years not to take her. After 40 years of being the king of Cush, then the queen said, you know what, he doesn't want to marry me. Then plus he's a foreigner, he's not a local, he's not from us, we need to cast him out. They let him go with gifts and wealth, and he arrives in Midian when he was 66. He's imprisoned by Ruel, by Yitro, okay? And I want you to see something very, very interesting. He was in prison for 10 years, but I want you to see this. Exodus 2 verse 19. They reply, a Mizraimi or Egyptian rescued us from the shepherds. More than that, he drew water for us and gave water to the sheep. He asked his daughters, where is it? Where did they leave the man? Invite him to come and eat. This is what the Torah says. Book of Yashar speaks about the same thing, but the only difference is that the Torah doesn't speak the rest. Moshe told them everything that happened in Cush, in Assyria, and how he became, he was a warrior, that he fought for them. They made him a king. And after that, I guess they didn't want him anymore because he didn't want to marry the queen. And they let him go with gifts and everything. Jethro did not believe him. He says, no, I think this guy escaped. So what did he do? He put him in prison for 10 years. He left him to die. But who had compassion towards over him? It was his daughter Sephora. Every day he went to give him bread. Every day he gave him food so he can survive because he believed him. Book of Yashar 76:19. And Reuel said to his daughter, and where is it? Why do you left the man? And Reuel sought for him and brought him home and ate bread with him. And Moses told Reuel that all he had fled from Egypt and reigned for 40 years over Cush, and that afterwards they have taken away his government and sent him in shalom with honor and with gifts. And Reuel had heard Moshe's word, Reuel said to him, I will put this man in the prison house, so I will reconcile the sons of Cush. For he had fled from them, and they took him and put him in the prison house, and Moshe was for 10 years. You see that? And this is the story of Moses after so many years when he arrives over Yitro. Verse 36. And he saw, and behold, the men that Moshe lived in the dungeon, standing, exalting, praying to Yahweh of his fathers. The reason why I kind of fast forward a little bit is because Sephora, after 10 years of hiding and bringing food for them, he pleased for Moses. And he said to his father, her father, this guy hasn't done anything. Why do you put him in prison for so many years? He's being in prison. And the father said, well, he's probably dead. Let's find out. When they went in there, the father didn't know that Sephora was every day bringing food. But how did they find them? Find them on the dungeon, standing, praying to Yahweh, exalting to Yahweh. And he actually believed that he was Moshe the warrior, Moshe the Egyptian, okay, Moshe the Hebrew. But something, and the reason why he gave his daughter to Moshe, Sephora, is because, remember what we read earlier? Jethro took the staff of Yosef. That staff happens to be, has a history, and that happens to be Shem's staff. Basically, that one comes all the way from the Garden of Eden. Adam had it, Shem had it, gave it to Abraham. Abraham gave it to Yitzhak. Yitzhak gave it to who? Yaakov. Yaakov gave it to Yosef. And when Yosef died, he was restored and all their belongings in the kingdom. And one day, Yitro took it and brought it home to Midian. He put it on his garden and nobody took it out. Couldn't get it out. And until somebody worth getting it was going to be the one that was going to deliver who? Deliver the Israelites from bondage. He knew all that. Until that day that Moshe was standing, this is what happens. He was standing praying to the Creator because they let him go out of the prison. And what happens next, brothers and sisters? We're just finishing right now. Moshe saw the staff, which happens to be a sapphire staff, a rod, and that was kind of blinking there. He went in there, and from that garden, he rooted out like a plant. And when he rooted out, he read the staff. There was something written there. It was the name of our Creator Yahweh, written in there in Paleo-Hebrew. And when Jethro saw this, because every Midianite, every people around tried to root it out and couldn't, and he said to all these men, if you can get it out, I'll give you my daughter's hand. And because Moshe did get it out, he gave his daughter Sephora to Moshe. Have we ever heard this story, guys? Is King Arthur's story too. So once again, what it was, it will be again. The story repeats itself. It's nothing new under the sun, brothers and sisters. We come to an end. Thank you for your time. I'm Moreh Rapha'Yah. We'll see you again next Shabbat. Thank you.